Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar. The topic today is career engagement in the COVID-19 context. Thank you to everybody who registered for this webinar, and thanks to you who registered before last week, and also to our presenters as we dealt with the technology fiasco, and I thank you again for your patience and grace in dealing with that. Today's webinar will be recorded and we will email it out to you within a few days. Before we get started, I would like to introduce you to Aspect, or reintroduce you to Aspect, and what we do for our members and the sector. Oops. Aspect represents about 100 employment service provider organizations and businesses throughout the province. We provide leadership, education, advocacy, and public awareness in support of the community-based workforce development service providers. We work with government and stakeholders to ensure the needs of those seeking a meaningful and sustainable livelihood are met. This webinar is part of our professional development opportunities, and today we have partnered with Dr. Roberta Nault and Dr. Deirdre Pickerel to provide you with expert learning. Starting this fall, we are very pleased to announce our values-based leadership series. This is an online learning opportunity that can be taken as a single course or as a whole series of for a recognized credential. To obtain the recognized credential, you must complete 6 core courses, 3 of which plus 3 of 6 electives being offered. Finally, at the end of the course, a capstone project with a Pechakucha presentation will give you an opportunity to solve a problem that you might be working with at work. The values-based leadership course information can be found on our website, aspect.bc.ca, under professional development. And the values-based leadership is a partnership between Aspect and Life Strategies, and we are delighted to be able to have world-renowned experts available to our members. Your presenters today are Dr. Roberta Nault. She is the president of Life Strategies Limited, a project director of the Canadian Career Development Foundation, an adjunct professor at the University of British Columbia. She has been internationally recognized for her leadership in the career development sector with the Edith St. John Wilman Award and the Stu Conger Award in Canada. As well, the Asia Pacific Career Development Association's Outstanding Educator of Career Professionals Award. And most recently, she was named as a fellow in the National Career Development Association in the US. We also have with us Dr. Deirdre Pickerel. She is a vice president of Life Strategies Limited and Dean of Student Success at Yorkville University and the Toronto Film School. She has spent 25 plus years helping clients navigate the complex world of work, supporting their efforts to find work that is engaging, fulfilling, and worth getting up for every day. She approaches her work with the philosophy that all persons have the right to be in work that is engaging and rewarding. Deirdre is co-author of the Career Engagement Model and has been honored with the 2014 Stu Conger Award for Leadership in Career Development and Career Counseling, and the 2006 Human Resources Association Award of Excellence. I now turn it over to Roberta and Deirdre.
One of our famous tip sheets with our 10 tips that we'll be able to share with you after the webinar today. So let's move along to setting the scene, and I think by now the little image of what this COVID-19 virus looks like is probably ingrained in our heads. but let's just really quickly have a look at the timeline. So you can see that we've actually been dealing with this globally, really since December, and there's some reports that indicate even earlier than that. But speaking for me, I was paying attention. I was, kind of, you see what was happening in China and in Wuhan, and thinking, it's a world away, and how is this really going to impact us? And it didn't really start until we were a few months in, when we look back in terms of the start of this global pandemic, before it really started affecting us here in Canada. So one of the things that we thought was interesting to share last week was where we are now. So you can see last week, when we were going to have our session here, we had done a little bit of a tally of worldwide statistics. I thought I would update that for you this morning, but I couldn't figure out how to update it on the slide in our fancy program here. So just for context, it's interesting, from April to 28th, just 1 week ago, to today, we're now up to 3.8 million cases of COVID-19 worldwide. So that's 1 million more than just 7 days ago. We're up to 268,000 deaths, unfortunately, globally. But we can also celebrate, we're up to 1.3 million people recovered. So you can see how these numbers are changing so drastically in such a short period of time. So with every new case, obviously we have new recovery, but unfortunately we also, are losing, friends and colleagues and loved ones, each and every day. So let's see how you're doing. So this is what I need you to do. Hopefully you can all see at the top of your screen. If you could grab your cell phone, or if you have a way to, open an internet browser on the laptop or computer you're using, you're going to go to menti.com, and you're going to use the code at the top of the screen. Mine keeps disappearing because of my Zoom, but it should be there. And we want to know who you're isolating with. So I can see we have about 130 participants on the call. So I'm just going to give you, another, 15 seconds or so to see if we can bump up our numbers here. We're sitting at 69, 70 and counting. Okay, so you can see I don't think this is much of a surprise. Roberta, feel free to chime in. But, lots of us are in isolation with spouses or partners, and, with or without children. So we're not necessarily, completely alone. Some of us are, we do have a few people on the joining us today that are isolating alone. And so really the word isolation, I think, takes on a bit of a new meaning when you truly are relying on, you're living alone, eating alone, watching TV alone, all of those sorts of things, and perhaps your only connections are through something like Zoom. And there's probably some of us that are finding new ways to use technology to be connected. Roberta and I have worked online for a long, long time, so I've always had an opportunity to build fabulous relationships using technology. But I think we would probably both admit that when you actually get to see somebody in person and give them a hug, it just kind of it makes a difference. And so we're human beings are social creatures. We're not really meant to spend this much time in complete and utter isolation. So across the country, we're seeing, and certainly here in BC, we're seeing that things are starting to open up. So we're hearing about that, some of us will be very excited to maybe not be able to hug our moms, but certainly spend some family time this weekend. Okay. So I'm going to move us along. Some of you might not have figured that out yet. You're going to get more opportunities to play with our polling here with Mentimeter. So that's great. Thanks for doing that. Okay. So in addition to wanting to know how you were isolating, we also wanted to ask you how you're feeling. So if you think about this moment in time, what is one word? And I think you'll only be able to do one. What's one word that describes how you're feeling right now? I have to admit, every time I see this technology work like this, it's just pretty cool.
I especially like how anxious just got outranked by hopeful.
Yeah, isn't that fantastic?
We've also, sorry, Cassie chiming in here. We've also had some people using the chat menu to put in their words as well. Wonderful and impatient came up.
Okay, thanks, Cassie. That's great. I was going to monitor at the same time, but I just can't multitask that way. And look at hopeful is still staying, right? That anxious might be catching up, but we still have hopeful that is.
I wonder if that's different this week than it would have been last week, now
Yeah,
that they've made some announcements about things opening up.
Maybe. But I think what it reflects, Roberta, is so many conversations that we've probably had with colleagues and we've had together and we've had with our families, that there's this real sense of mixed feelings. Some people, and you could be feeling the same thing. I can be both hopeful and stressed, both frustrated, and and have a feeling of being grateful. So we're we're not single emotion beings, so it's not at all unusual to see the wide range of feelings that are displayed on the screen. And that with we have 103 responses, and so each of you got an opportunity to write one word, and so there's certainly some commonalities, but you can see that there are some words that perhaps only got as few as one or two votes. Some of them are kind of hard to see. So with the I'm thinking of the light green ones and the yellow ones: quiet, contemplative, limited. I might need new glasses. Unbalanced, unhealthy, in limbo, productive. I see reflective, not all blessed. I see grateful, not altogether bad things. Okay, we've got one more for you before we move on.
Someone just put in chat, overwhelmed for sure, and that was definitely one of the words
that was definitely one of the words. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the other thing we wanted to know as we kind of set the stage for our conversation about career engagement is what specific change has impacted you the greatest? And this is just an open-ended question. So, feel free to type in. It may be, the quarantine. It may be the technology. It may be homeschooling. So again, we see some, some differences. This one's really interesting. This one has come up for me. This how busy I am, and I'll admit that when this first happened, I thought, oh boy, what am I gonna spend my time doing? And I'm incredibly busy at work right now. So, I'm feeling, a little bit grateful for that as well. Because certainly not everybody's been, lots of people have lost their jobs, which is, really unfortunate in this. So I feel quite blessed, but at the same time, I'm blessed that I'm working, blessed that my family's healthy, all of those sorts of things. But also, when I think about how busy I am, I think, how can I keep up this pace? So there's a bit of a mixed feeling there. So let's see what else. Not being able to help clients in person, absolutely. School closures, we see homeschooling. This whole notion of working from home, the sense of isolation, not seeing family. So some of these things have come up, but oh boy, we've had to embrace technology as a sector, haven't we, with this with this COVID. Roberta and I have talked a lot about the need to embrace technology in the sector for a long time, but there's coming at it slowly, but and gradually, and perhaps being dragged a little bit is certainly different from being thrown off the deep end like we all have been, since this pandemic started. No commuting cost. Yeah, that's a good one. The BC Transit doesn't appreciate that one very much. But again, it's the thing we see with everything so far is, this has impacted people in such a variety of ways, and some of those impacts, have a bit of a positive spin on them, and some of them are obviously quite negative. So before I turn you over to Roberta, so thanks for doing that. I think there's a couple more. It's a pretty neat tool that we've used to help engage you in our webinar here today. So I just have to move my box here. So we just wanted to, obviously, this won't be news to anybody, but Canada, as a country, we've had a response. Provinces have had a response, and in lots of cases, each province has handled things a bit differently. I'm quite proud of how BC has navigated this pandemic. At first, when it kind of seemed to hit us first, I thought, oh boy, what's going to happen to our province? But we've managed to have some containment around it, which I think is really good. Obviously, Canada's response has included protecting the health and safety of Canadians. There's been lots of collaboration with province and territories and with Indigenous leaders and communities around how are we going to do everything from shut down the economy to rebuild the economy, to make sure people have the supply chain is there, make sure people have access to groceries. Does everybody remember that that the run on toilet paper that was that seems like so long ago? So Canada's response has really been to not only make sure that these systems are operating and doing what we need, but we've seen lots of people that have come forward and saying our supply chain will be fine, so we'll have to worry about some of these, some of the fundamentals. Obviously, Canada, when we consider ourselves a member of the global community, and so we've been doing a lot around contributing to the national response, ensuring economic resilience, and maintaining those government services to Canadians. And I think there's been lots of debate, and I'm sure lots of houses certainly has been in mind about the quote unquote right. Have we done it right? And I think that in a time like this, that's unprecedented, right becomes what was right one day or 1 minute, it changes. And so, I think that when I look at my own work, the decision that we make one day in terms of a response to a student or response to a client seems to be, it's the best decision. It's the right decision that I could have made at that time. But then there's so many factors that we're juggling. Sometimes, as they say that hindsight's always 20/20. So when we look back, we can say, yeah, I probably would have done things differently. But boy, did I ever think I was doing the right thing or making that right choice or doing what was best at the time. This is such an incredibly moving target that I think it will be the history books will ultimately decide, right? Okay, so I'm going to turn you over to Roberta to talk about a little bit more about career engagement in the COVID-19
Okay.
context.
Well, some of you, thanks Deirdre, some of you will be familiar with the career engagement model. I know you've even participated in the research that we did for Deirdre's doctoral dissertation several years ago. But just in a nutshell, you'll see that the engagement zone, the green zone, we've used traffic light colors on purpose here, is where you'd hope to be. The yellow zone is that early warning indicator that you're moving out of engagement, and you could be moving in one of two directions, either to being overwhelmed or to being underutilized. If you're in either of those orange zones too long, you can become completely disengaged. And one day we'll have a 3D version of this model, but if we were able to fold it like a cylinder, then the disengaged parts together are the same thing. So once someone is disengaged, they are disengaged, and it's going to be hard to get them moving forward. But your fix is going to be very different if they got engaged from being overwhelmed or engaged from being underutilized. So you'll see that where you land is largely a match between challenge and capacity. And where the career engagement model is different from other models like Csikszentmihalyi's work on flow is that when we look at capacity, we look at both individual but also organizational, contextual, systemic capacity. And that's why we think this model is particularly helpful right now when we're in such an unprecedented, chaotic time with the pandemic. How can we, wearing 3 hats today, as individuals, look at our own engagement, as managers and co-workers, look at the engagement of the people that we're working with or supervising or responsible for, and then as career development practitioners, the engagement of the clients and the folks that we're serving. And so I'm hoping going forward today you can really take that multi-person approach to this, because there'll be things that you can do to align your own capacity and challenge. There'll be things that you can do organizationally to provide more capacity or reduce challenge for the folks you're working with. And I really love the emphasis on kindness. Sometimes it's as simple as being kind and recognizing that, as we saw in the Mentimeter slide that said, are you isolating alone or with extended family members? We're not going through this in an identical way, and we'll talk more about that later. So it is really important for us to understand that our experience, even though we're in the same situation, might be quite different from someone else's. So if we look at the challenges in the COVID-19 era, we've experienced new challenges. We already were going into this with a variety of challenges. We've had, work-related challenges, family challenges, but some of the new things that we're facing would be the social distancing restrictions, and how do we do what we do when we can't physically be with people. So I've taken on a new role at UBC and been part of lots of discussions around how do we do this online. The president of the university at 5:45 on a Friday night sent a message out to the entire community, the faculty and students at the same time, saying all of our courses will be online by Monday morning. Now, my background and Deirdre's, current position is with an online university, and we know what it takes to get e-learning in place at a graduate level, and it doesn't happen just over a weekend. So there have been months of conversation now around, what do we do? What do we do about clinics? What do we do about practicum placements? What do we do about face-to-face counseling? So just yesterday, the announcement was made that in-counseling services or counseling services are considered, on that short list of occupations that will open up to be done in person, which changes all of the work that people have been doing for the last 2 months on how do we take this online. So, the whole social distancing restrictions have, caused traffic jams within Safeway stores as we try to figure out what aisle we're allowed to go up and down, but also has really fundamentally changed how we do life and work. We also have travel restrictions, of course. Those of you that know me know that that's what I do, is travel for work. So I've so far had 9 trips canceled, and that's really been a lot of time that I'm not spending in airports and airplanes. It's bonus time. I'm thrilled to have that extra time right now. But it also means that work that I would normally do, time that I would normally spend at conferences, work that I would normally travel to consult with, or keynotes that I would present, none of that's happening. So travel restrictions are not just that a holiday has been canceled or a vacation has been canceled, that too. But also we're not able to get to where the work would need to be done or meetings would normally happen. There have, of course, been forced closure of many, many workplaces, and apparently not forced closure of some workplaces that should have been closed, whereas some of the clusters of outbreaks have been. There's been, much more focus on cleaning than there had been before, and the whole PPE, we now know a new acronym, personal protective equipment, that hasn't been available to many. There's also been a lot of focus, as Deirdre already mentioned, on new technologies and then concerns around access to just the information we need. UBC, over that weekend, faculty were locked out of their offices and not allowed to go back, and it's only now that they're allowed to make an appointment and go back. So people who didn't have what they needed to do all of their work from home have been limping along in the meantime, and I'm sure that's the case for people and clients that you're serving. However, there's also been lots of things done to increase capacity in the midst of this pandemic. So there's been a focus on how to help people that are struggling with isolation, mental, physical health, wellness initiatives. So you see webinars, you see funding for different programming, money going to different charitable organizations that can sort of help to deal with these problems that are directly related to the pandemic. There have been, people's capacity has been stretched in terms of balancing childcare and elder care responsibilities. And so those of you that are not isolating alone, many of the people that I've been in contact with are sharing their computer or their Zoom time with 4 or 5 other people in the household, and trying to work around each other, or their bandwidth on their internet isn't enough to have several Zoom meetings going at the same time. There have been also capacity challenges and successes in engaging with social networks. So people have found all sorts of creative ways to, have drinks and dinner with friends in a Zoom connection. I personally have a wedding coming up, and we've really condensed the number of people that will be there. It'll just be immediate family. But we've actually, through that, been able to open up the number of people that will be able to participate, because we will connect with Zoom. And so people that we would never have thought to invite to a small wedding now can participate in that. People, as Deirdre already mentioned, have found themselves transitioning to virtual work and learning environments, and some of them want to stay there. And so there is a lot of talk around who will be allowed to continue to work at least part-time from home, and what that might do to some of our traffic challenges. And certainly I'm appreciating the fresh air and the views that we have now that I haven't seen since I grew up in the Vancouver area in the 50s and 60s. And I really don't want to lose that again. We also find that people have been developing new skills and building new skills, which is part of enhancing capacity, but also there's had to be some support from organizations and from the government in terms of arranging the required supplies and equipment. And, we've seen things like, that could be called pirating or hijacking of planes that have medical equipment supplies. One country, not to be mentioned, was doing that to make sure that their supplies were in place. I'm grateful to be part of a country that hasn't done that, but has equipped local factories and businesses to start to produce things in-house. So what I wanted you to see there is that in our definition of capacity, it's very, very broad. So Csikszentmihalyi, when he talked about matching challenge and skills, was really looking at the individual and what they could do, their competencies. Where we're looking at capacity as being, it includes individual capacity and mental health and well-being and skills, but it also includes all of those external supports like childcare, housekeeping responsibilities, help with grocery shopping. People are now shopping online that didn't used to. So there's been all sorts of ways of building capacity to do things differently. If we look at the engagement model, as I mentioned before, there's 2 distinctly different ways to become disengaged. And this is important for us to keep in mind, because when you're working with someone who appears to be disengaged, it could be because they're overwhelmed. It could be because the challenge is just too high for the capacity that they have available, and so they've shut down. But it also could be because they've been underutilized, and so they've shut down because they have nothing to do. And you may be facing both yourself. You can actually be concurrently overwhelmed and underutilized. We found in Deirdre's research, if we think about a professional immigrant, for example, they may be underutilized in their professional work, but overwhelmed in terms of settling into a new country and trying to get by financially. So within yourself, you may find yourself overwhelmed with the news and uncertainty about the future, but underutilized because you're not able to do the kinds of things that you used to do, and you know that you're not able to bring your best self to projects. You may also, within a home, find that some people are overwhelmed and others are underutilized. And that can cause some real tension within your home or even within a team, where some people feel like they're doing everything and other people feel like, I just don't even know what to do. What can I do to help, or how can I stay? What would get me out of bed in the morning, which is part of Deirdre's bio introduction. We want to help people be fully engaged. So if we turn to Mentimeter one more time, in considering your current state of challenge and capacity, where do you most often find yourself? So do you find yourself more overwhelmed, underutilized, both? You're only allowed to pick one. So that's dramatically different, Deirdre, than the results we got from this same sector when you were doing your doctoral research. Do you want to unmute yourself for a second and just remind us about what it looked like in that research a few years ago, which was just after the transformation?
Yeah, so there was a much more tendency to be disengaged and overwhelmed. So we seem to be perhaps not as overwhelmed now as we were during business transformation. When was that? 2012 kind of era. What was really interesting, Roberta, and we don't have the ability to do that here, was as part of my dissertation, it was part of the real interest was around the age groups. We would have older workers feeling one way and younger workers feeling another way. That was another interesting piece. But so I would actually say that there's some commonalities here. It's not that much difference. It almost makes me wonder if we have a tendency as a sector to be a little bit on the overwhelmed side.
I don't know. From what I recall, I'd have to go back and look at the data now, but I thought people were more in that engaged zone. So I'm seeing like the bulk of people here leaning left. Mm-hmm. And where I think that, when we were really unpacking it within engaged, seeing people moving towards slightly overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. But now we're having people actually not identify as engaged, but more on the overwhelmed side. Mm-hmm. And not so many on the underutilized side, and a few that now are completely disengaged through being underutilized. So
isn't that interesting that we have almost a balance in terms of disengaged through underutilized and disengaged through overwhelmed? Mm-hmm. And I think, Roberta, that really talks to what you were saying just a moment ago about the experience of individuals. We're all experiencing a global pandemic, but how we're how that's impacting our day-to-day lives can be so different, and it's really reflected here. It would be easy to assume that my coworkers are all slightly overwhelmed, but actually, looking at our group here, there's some of us that are underutilized and disengaged because they've just gotten bored. And
I think I'm going to move on to the next slides, but I think it is really important for us to remember this, because when we're working with our team members and checking in with our team members, it's easy to assume that we're having the same experience. And this quote says, we're drenched by the same crashing waves. Like we're all in the pandemic together, but we're in different boats. And so you can imagine being in a big freighter in crashing waves and a tiny little dinghy in crashing waves, and the experience is quite different. So, I recognize that I'm coming at this from a position of privilege. I've worked online, I've worked from home. My skills are highly in demand right now. And so I'm not suffering from this in the same way financially, although as a small business owner, I have access to some of the supports for small businesses that, I almost feel guilty accessing. And so I think that it's very, very interesting and important for us to remember that as we're going through this experience, as we saw on the previous slide, as we saw in the earlier Mentimeters, that people are experiencing this quite differently. And we may have a very different feeling each day. I was speaking with someone yesterday who was having a bad day, and the day before had been a good day. And so, these things are very tenuous right now. We also have, even though I'm in a position of privilege, I'm connected with people that are going through very, very different experiences right now. So some of them are really struggling financially. Some of them are struggling with lack of childcare and yet still expected to work as a professional from home. I was speaking with my lawyer the other day. He said, my phone is about to die. My kids took the charger out of my car. Everyone is sort of juggling with the same technology equipment. So I think that it's important for us to be like active listeners if we're putting on our family hat or our coworker manager hat, to really be observing, to ask questions about context, to not assume that because we're seeing someone with a nice little background behind them in a Zoom meeting that everything is actually okay. And I found that it's actually given me some real insight to see people in their homes and to see people, with what's going on behind them. It gives me a better understanding of how their life is right now on a day-to-day basis. I want to quickly run through 3 models for you and then hand it back. We'll move into the tip sheets. But one of the models that I think is particularly important right now is Mary McMahon and Wendy Patton's systems theory framework. You can read about this in the Theories and Models book. Mary was one of the co-editors of the book that Sarek published last year. But in a nutshell, what this is saying is that as individuals, we're bringing all sorts of context with us all the time. And when one of those individuals meets another individual, so for me as a career development practitioner meeting a client, I'm bringing all my stuff with me. They're bringing all their stuff with me. So there's an awful lot of going on when we connect. There's also a lot of environmental influences, and the lightning strokes there are the chance events that impact us. And of course, this pandemic is one of them. There's also the interaction and influence of past, present, and future. And so when we look at all that together in the context of career engagement in the COVID-19 era, you can imagine that people are experiencing things quite differently and that their systems have been disrupted like never before. And so it's going to take some time for those systems to stabilize and for people to figure out anything that might resemble a new normal going forward. If we look at the roller coaster model of unemployment, which, Borgen and Amundsen out of UBC have written about for years, their research was back in the 80s. The early stages are shock, anger, and denial. And we've certainly seen that played out in, some of the news streams or Twitter, depending on, which world leader you want to be listening to. But there's shock, anger, and denial is really normal. So in the beginning, some of us were saying, what are they making the big deal about? This isn't, it's the flu. And then as people started to see pictures and, particularly when Italy shut down, I think that's when we started to say, hey, this could be us. People started to experience worry and anxiety. And you saw in the Mentimeter that that's still a really big part of what people are feeling right now. For people that are unemployed, and right now that's a big percentage of our population, they go through a bit of an upswing as they anticipate job search. So right now when announcements have come out that the economy is opening up, there's probably a little bit more hope. And then this yo-yo stress around the time it takes, applying for a job and then not getting that job, not being selected for it, finding work that then turns out to be not that suitable once they get it. And so then there's a coping bridge, and that's where various supports are available, and people either access those supports or don't. And the ones that do access the support can move on to reemployment, and the ones that don't access the support may become fully disengaged or give up. And so this roller coaster model, I think, is particularly important for us to dust off our shells. I used to have a picture of it up on the wall in a transition center that I ran. I think it's particularly important because people are going through a shocking stage right now, and many of them will believe that they're just going to be called back to work and it'll be business as usual, and it won't be for a number of people. And so we've got a lot of work to do over the next months and years in helping people to re-stabilize, I think, after this. The other model that I wanted to briefly look at was the work that Nancy Schlossberg did with the 4S model of transition. You're probably familiar with Bill Bridges' transition model. It talks about an ending zone, a neutral zone, and a new beginning. But she said our experience is different, and this really fits with that different boats in the same ocean metaphor. She said the situation, what's happening, might be similar. We're all in the midst of a pandemic, but how we navigate that, who's it happening to, whether my health is compromised or not, whether I see myself as a person in that vulnerable category. I am by age, but I don't feel that way in terms of my health. The supports, what supports are available. Some people, have computers set up at home. Others are having to buy computers for the first time and get used to them. And I was talking to someone today who, got her MacBook but hasn't got her mouse yet and is sort of doing it one step at a time and hates it. And then people have strategies that they brought with them into the crisis, but also new strategies that they're needing to learn. So this is another model that you might find useful and that you can read more about. So that brings us to the stage where we wanted to start sharing our 10 tips, and we'll go through them quickly, but there is a whole tip sheet that, well, I can show you what it looks like, and you'll get a link to it and can find it on our website as well. So for each of these tips that are very brief on here, you'll see them spelled out in a bit more detail. And the first tip is to fuel optimism. So
I'm going to jump in here, Roberta.
Or are you going to do them?
Yeah, no, I'm going to take over. But I thought I would quickly just ask Cassie, are there any questions that it would make sense to answer now? I think you've been monitoring.
No, it's been quite quiet. So
right.
Feel free to just continue on.
Okay, thanks, Cassie. Okay, so tip number 1 is fuel optimism. And and this is probably more important now more than ever. In actually Roberta's doctoral research on managing career transitions during transformational times, optimism was the single best predictor of career success and job satisfaction. So anytime, we talk about this, I know for me, I think of all of the really important things that we do as managers, as coworkers, as career professionals, in terms of helping each other, develop our skills, or helping clients write resumes, or our 30-second summaries and all of those sorts of things. How much time do we spend really encouraging clients and our coworkers to be optimistic about the future? We've seen some of this repeated in the work in the hope-centered model. So it's really important that we find strategies and ways to truly embrace being optimistic about the future. It's not all doom and gloom. I was watching on the news yesterday about the slowing down of all of the ocean traffic, and how that's really providing some space and opportunity to do research with our southern resident killer whales in the Salish Sea. So it's interesting how what seems to have been so awful for some of us is actually helping others out. And I keep remembering Dr. Bonnie Henry talking about it's not forever, it's just for now. So the other thing that we do as career practitioners often is we're always actively reframing, and I'm seeing this everywhere in I'm not really sure how to say it, because I'm a bit of above that age group, around, I don't know, I think they're called memes, or however whatever they're talked about, but it's not trapped at home, it's safe at home. I'm cocooning at home. So we have the ability to remember, optimism is a learned skill. So when we think about our actively reframing, if we can, see the positive and reframe the negative experiences into something a little bit more positive, I think it will really help us build on our ability to be hopeful, our ability to be optimistic. So I'm whipping through these because I'm just conscious of time. Some of the brilliant things that we have seen come out of this is communities coming together, creating resources to help local service industry workers, freelance artists. Downtown Vancouver, I haven't gone down there personally because, of course, I'm supposed to be isolating at home. The murals that have been painted, because we had to unfortunately close stores and they've been boarded up, and so the beautiful murals databases of local restaurants, fundraising with cool merchandise. People are sharing what they have. They're volunteering their time. From the I don't know if anybody saw the news of the young man telling jokes out of his joke book, right? Like, it's just, it hasn't mattered. People have come together. I remember when we were watching, when it was first starting, and it was really starting to go, with the world, what's happening, when we were seeing Italians, really much more isolating than we are, and opera singers singing from their patios. And, it's just this coming together of community has been quite miraculous, I think. Oh, I hit the button on my phone instead of hitting the PowerPoint. So the other thing that we're seeing is, organizations contributing what they can. And so we've got some of the big guns for you on the screen, Procter & Gamble to produce 45,000 liters of hand sanitizer weekly. So, the amount of money that, as corporate Canada and corporate America and corporate global have come together to try to fight in this. But there's lots of amazing things that individuals have done. So we've got another Mentimeter for you. And we just wanted to, as we look towards the future and the coming days and weeks and months, what's one thing that you personally, or someone that you actually know, is doing to make the world a better place right now? So my example was the young man telling jokes. I don't know him, but I thought that was cute. Okay, so we've got staying home, being positive, contributing to the food banks, taking groceries to vulnerable populations, helping our neighbors, feeding the front line. Yeah, feed the front lines, feeding the frontline workers. Kids making sewing masks. That's great. I love that. The people banging the pots. Yeah, that is absolutely. Oh, this is a really interesting one. The local yoga studio offering free classes online. Organizations and careers that you would never have thought could be done virtually, whether it's yoga or physical fitness training, all of those sorts of things. Like, these are great examples of what people are doing. And what I'm really touched by is the staying home, because we're talking about, that's a great way to reframe that whole notion of, being, isolating on our own, is that by staying home, we are making the world a better place, because, we've been told that physical distancing is really the thing that is going to help us keep this virus. It needs people to feed on. So, if we can stop the areas of transmission. So yeah, staying home is something that we can all be doing to make the world a better place. Okay, let's move along. Thanks so much for doing that. So this is tip number 5, and this is innovate. And I just kind of alluded to that with the yoga classes and the fitness trainers and stuff going online. So this is just a quote that really COVID-19 has irrevocably changed the way businesses will compete over the next decade. And I'm seeing that in my own work as well with my university, the things that we are doing that we always could have done. We will all admit these are things that we always could have done, and I would argue always should have been doing. But for whatever reason, we just didn't. It wasn't important enough. It wasn't in all of the competing priorities, all the things that we have to do, limited energy and resources and time and all that sort of stuff. It became a nice to have as opposed to a must have. But COVID-19 has made some of those nice to haves, and if I can build a strong enough rationale, maybe I'll get support, to an absolute must have. And we're innovating in ways that I could never have imagined. And so that's been a really good thing for me. And I think we'll see that from businesses that are, used to produce hockey masks and now are producing face shields. Like, the innovation that is happening right now is second to none, really. So Rupert, I'm going to turn it over to you for our last tips, except I can't find my button.
Great.
There we go.
So tip number 6 is communicate effectively. And this, again, is speaking to you wearing all of your hats. So at home, being clear on who needs the device when, or needs quiet, or needs, to just go for a walk. But I think we also have seen really amazing examples that I think are going to be textbook examples referred back to in the future about how to communicate. So if you look at Justin Trudeau coming out faithfully every morning at the same time, even when his wife was, inside sick with the disease, in talking in a calm voice and responding to questions. I think that kind of clear communication just de-escalates. We do workshops and training on how to de-escalate conflict. And we've been able to see that happen here, where you're not giving people anything really to fight with. We've seen at a local level, Bonnie Henry with "This is our time to be kind, to be calm, and to be safe." And you see that theme of kindness picked up everywhere. And originally we were talking about social distancing, and then people said, no, we don't want to be social distancing. It needs to be physical distancing, but we still need social connection. So, we've learned to communicate as we go, to share the information, the best information we have right now, to not overpower people with too much information, but also not to be holding back, to give people the information they need to be able to plan the next day or the next week. We still don't know what the long-term future is going to look like. So I think that's really important for us on all levels. The next tip is looking at how to take care of the people around you. So thinking about all of you who specifically might be managers or team leaders or supervisors, recognizing that employee engagement, in Deirdre's research while she was doing her doctoral program, it's made up of the opportunity to contribute, but also contributions made by the employer. There's a crossover, a dual reciprocal arrangement here. Appreciation, that employees need to feel appreciated, but so do employers need to feel appreciated. So take the time to let people know what you appreciate about working for them or with them. There needs to be a commitment, and we're seeing that now with the wage subsidy. What employers are actually committed to their employees and bringing them back, or have kept them on all along, and which people feel like maybe there's less of a commitment. And again, that's two-way. Employers are wondering, are there going to be people there to hire back when I need them to help my business out? And then alignment is something that Deirdre added more from our career development work, that there has to be a values alignment between what you're doing and what your workplace is doing. And I think we're really seeing people come drawn back to their core values, their deeply held values in a crisis like this. So think about how to help the people around you become fully engaged. And then, as I mentioned, it's really done my heart good to see the Be Kind when I was Associate Dean of a really large counseling program at Yorkville University years ago. We had two mantras. One was that we were trying to build a culture of kindness, and the other was to believe the best. And I think that if we can hold on to that culture of kindness and be fueling a culture of kindness and building it, you're seeing people check in with their neighbors. You're seeing people leave small gifts on each other's porches. You're seeing people share information that others might not have access to. You're seeing people just be gracious and patient and pausing even in traffic to allow someone to move forward. It's almost like going back 2 or 3 decades, or going into a real northern community to see how people are treating each other better now. And I really hope we don't lose that. The 9th tip is to choose wisely. And Deirdre has this in her signature line, has had it for a long, long time. Life is change, growth is optional, so choose wisely. And I think that as we're moving forward, and especially with the announcements this week of, our lockdown easing a little bit and moving back to some kind of a new normal, we have an opportunity to choose what to bring back into our lives and what not to bring back into our lives, and what to leave space for, maybe that we would like to do differently. So I just really encourage you going forward to draw from this unique opportunity that we've had to let go of pretty much everything, and be strategic about what you choose to pick up and put back into your life. Very early on, Deirdre, who you know, and many of you heard us speak together, know is an introvert, and yet you'd never know that by her presenting. But, you know, is an off the chart introvert. And she said, I've been preparing for this for my whole life. Are you kidding me? Telling me to stay home, that's the best thing that ever happened. But how can we sort of re-enter the world, keeping the best of what this has taught us about ourselves, and also, you know, bringing back the pieces that we really have missed. I can't wait till I can have a hug from my grandchildren, for example. And then finally, our last tip for you is to be patient. Perfect isn't possible. And I think that we've seen an unusual display of programs rolled out intentionally that are less than perfect. Now, any of us in this sector have seen programs rolled out for years that were less than perfect. But I think that they've been received with more grace and kindness this time than ever before. And I think that we need to be patient with ourselves. I've heard so many people apologizing for not being as productive as usual. Are you kidding me? Nobody expects you to be as productive as usual. You know, we're all doing the best we can under really, really unusual circumstances. And so be patient with yourself, be patient with the people around you, be patient with your family, be patient with your clients, and let's embrace good enough. You know, let's allow ourselves to learn from behavioral economics, from design thinking, from all of the other things that we could grab onto right now that we've seen in action that would allow us to move forward in a really different way, where we are accepting that we don't have to wait until we've got everything aligned perfectly. We can go out and do the very best we can with what we have. So that brings us to our holistic definition of career, where, and Deirdre, I'm not sure, was I handing back to you at this point, or? Okay. So we have always looked at career as being that intersection of our work roles, our learning roles, our life roles. The career is really all encompassing. And so when we talk about career in the career engagement model, other people have referred to it as the school engagement model, or the learning engagement model, or the life engagement model, retirement engagement model. So we really are choosing to use career very holistically there. And when we look at moving forward from a career engagement perspective, we just really hope that this is something you'll be able to hold on to, that you'll think about what can you adjust. Some of you need a bit more challenge if you're underutilized. What can you take on that would be challenging and interesting and engaging for you? And how could we help the people around us by reducing the challenge just a little bit? What can we do in terms of building capacity, offering capacity, sharing capacity? And what could we do for those who really do need some extra resources or extra supports? We can build capacity in some areas of people's lives by reducing challenge. So there may be things like, for instance, as an employer, that I can say, choose your hours, reduce your hours, do what you can in order to manage the extra family responsibilities that you have, but don't feel guilty about it. So I hope that this has left you with just a little taste of some things that you could use going forward in working with yourselves, your clients, and your coworkers and employees.
Great. Are you, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Deirdre, and as well as Roberta and Cassie, who's been managing the question and answers. It doesn't look like we have any questions that have been raised because people have been using the text box, which is really great to see. We will have a recording of this available for you on the call within a couple of days. Just a disclaimer, I was a little late on touching the record button, so there may be a bit of an interruption at the beginning of Deirdre's presentation. And I also received confirmation from Cassie that the slides will be available to everyone, as well as the list that the tips list
sheet, yeah,
that we talked about. And I just thank you both. It really validated my experience in this environment and those that I've been working with through Aspect. I love the idea of embracing the good enough. And that has actually been an idea that I've been using for myself, because I'm feeling, I was part of the group that was overwhelmed through this whole challenge. And for many of us, the workload has been incredibly busy, as Deirdre had mentioned early. So thank you to all of you. You should be receiving a survey in your mailbox. If it should have gone like a minute ago. If you could take a moment to respond to the survey for us, it's really great to give us feedback. If you have any ideas of webinars that you would like presented in the future, or more information about the values-based leadership series, just send us a quick note in the survey, or you can email us at info@aspect.bc.ca, or you can go to our website under professional development and events, and all of the information is there. So any closing thoughts from our panelists today?
I just wanted to say how excited I am to, I'm looking forward to working with some of you in the value-based leadership course. I think it's going to be an amazing opportunity to reflect, to learn from each other, and to just sort of pause and think about what leadership means, and how you could be expanding that within your work role.
Great, thank you very much. And Deirdre, any closing comments?
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for coming and taking time out of your day. I hope that you got what you needed, what you hoped for. I hope you feel a little bit inspired, and just remember to please be kind and be calm and be safe. We wish you all well.
That's great parting words. Thank you all to all of you. And we'll look forward to having you again at the next webinar. Bye for now.
Bye all. Thanks, Janet.